What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Nacho Wrestling, and we are here with our first video essay of 2026, and we are taking a look at the art of technical wrestling, the graps, the holds, everything like that, and everything in between. We're going to talk about some of the greatest technical wrestlers of all time, and why I think technical wrestling still matters today in the landscape of high flying and landscape of cinema and everything like that. I want to talk about why I think technical wrestling is important still to this day. But before we do that, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell to stay up to date on all things Nacho Wrestling. And if this is your first time watching a Nacho Wrestling video, consider hitting that subscribe button and sharing this video with your friends. Without further ado, let's take a look at the art of technical wrestling. For starters, by no means am I a professional wrestling historian or anything like that. I'm no Dave Meltzer, I'm no Brian Alvarez, but I try my damnedest to understand the craft and know the history and lineage of certain things within pro wrestling. I will admit there are weaker points to my game, like I'm not familiar with the New Japan side of things as well as some people are. So if you want a real true deep dive and looking at something very specific, go look for it out on YouTube. There's a bunch of other ones out there, but don't click off this video. Stay for this one first. I just happen to be a lover of all things technical wrestling, from the late catch-as-catch-can style that popularized the UK scene in yesteryears, to the fluid and methodical strikes and mixing of strikes and holds and everything like that we see today with guys like Zack Sabre Jr. and Hechicero. And of course, everything in between as well. It is of my personal opinion, and I use that term very strongly because it's my opinion, and feel free to say that I'm wrong, but I do think that technical wrestling is one of, if not the premier style of professional wrestling out there today. But where did technical wrestling get its start? You could make the argument that technical wrestling got its start with the inception of pro wrestling as an idea itself back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. You had guys like Frank Gotch and the Gold Dust Trio of Ed the Strangler Lewis, Billy Sandow, and Toots Mond. Some guys that you're probably going to be like, huh? But one thing that all three of these guys had in common that a lot of wrestlers today don't really have is that they come from amateur wrestling backgrounds. Of course, you do have your amateur wrestlers like Kurt Angle and Gable Steveson. But these early day guys were legit grapplers. They knew how to genuinely tie people up into knots, and they do it for 2, 3, sometimes even as long as 12 hours during a carnival. And wrestling stayed this way for a long time, traveling with the circus, traveling with the carnival, these feats of strength matches and holds between guys for a long time. Up until one guy named Lou Thesz. See, Lou Thesz was the unifying champion for the NWA. No, not that NWA, the original NWA. He had the unenviable task of being the first ever world champion for the giant conglomeration of promotions, and along the way would meet some other great grapplers of the territories. Up first, we have our first subject. Subject 001, Lou Thesz. Like I mentioned earlier, Lou Thesz was the inaugural first ever NWA World's Heavyweight Champion. That is a feat that no other man will ever get to hold. He is also a multiple-time world champion for several different promotions from the territory era, and he is also one of the few men to be part of the WCW and WWE Hall of Fame. Give it up one time for the great Lou Thesz. Apart from Thesz, the territory era of professional wrestling saw a lot of great grapplers come out of the woodworks. We had guys like Verne Gagne, Whipper Billy Watson, and Gene Kiniski. All three, like the men of the formative years, had some amateur wrestling experience under their belt before stepping into the professional wrestling world. And they would use this to their advantage when having matches with other guys that maybe weren't as experienced in the wrestling as they were. If we're being honest, a lot of the guys of the territory era, especially the grapplers, left a little to be desired in terms of character work, but that would definitely be fixed up later on as we had the original Nature Boy Buddy Rogers come through the woodwork. A guy that was not only a legit grappler and could put people into knots and everything like that, but also a man who had flamboyance, who had character, who had the bright blonde hair, the robe, basically Ric Flair before Ric Flair. But we can't talk about the territory era without talking about probably the most well-known wrestler to come from the territory era, Bruno Sammartino. Bruno Sammartino was an Italian-American professional wrestler and, as we all know, is the longest reigning WWE or WWF champion of all time at like 7.5 years, with a total combined reign of spanning over 8 years total. Bruno had what a lot of these guys didn't have, and what we would probably classify today as aura. He was loved by the women for his charming good looks, and he was revered by the men for the things he could do in the ring. But like I said, he wasn't the only major name out of this era. I already mentioned Buddy Rogers, and I could go on all day talking about all these territory era grapplers, but that would be the entire video, and I'd have to turn this into a two-parter, and I've never done that before, so we're not going to do that today. Just let it be known that the territory era was home to some of the greatest grapplers, greatest technicians in all of professional wrestling, some that you may have never even heard of, and some that still get talked about to this day. Next up, we have Subject 002, the Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. Buddy Rogers is, of course, the inaugural WWF World Heavyweight Champion. He has held just about every title imaginable in the NWA, and he is also a member of the WWE Hall of Fame class of 1994. Give it up for the original Nature Boy, Buddy Rogers. Coming in with Subject 003, we have Bruno Sammartino, the Italian Stallion. Bruno, of course, is the longest reigning combined championship reign for the WWE and WWF titles at over 4,000 days. Just to do the math, that is roughly 8 years as champion. He also had Match and Feud of the Year with Larry Zbyszko in 1980, another living legend who gets an honorable mention for the video. And he did not join the WWE Hall of Fame till late in his life in 2013. Give it up one more time for the Italian Stallion, Bruno Sammartino. It is safe to say we all know that the wrestling world is a world. It's not just the United States. Wrestling takes place everywhere. In almost every country imaginable, there is professional wrestling. No more prevalent than in the United Kingdom and Japan. But who revolutionized, who popularized Japanese wrestling, United Kingdom wrestling, going outside of the United States and making a big name for yourself? No, not you, Kenny Omega. I'm talking about Karl Gotch. No relation to the aforementioned Frank Gotch at the top of the video, although he does get that last in-ring name from a friend of Frank Gotch himself. Karl is one of the few men and one of the first men to be brought up that not only emphasized holds in wrestling, but the counters to those holds as well. Because when he was in the ring with someone and they put him in a hold, he made it a point to show how enamoring it was to get out of that hold. One thing to note about Gotch is that his legacy is hampered a little bit compared to the rest, as he did get into a backstage tussle back in the day with Nature Boy Buddy Rogers, and that led to him being pretty much blackballed by other US promotions, which caused him to have to go work in Japan and the UK. It was after this tussle with Nature Boy Buddy Rogers that Gotch really found his stride, of course in Japan and in Europe, more importantly in Japan, where he met some guy by the name of Antonio Inoki. Antonio Inoki, founder of New Japan Pro Wrestling, was trained and mentored by the incomparable and infamous Ricky Dozen, and he started his career in the now defunct Japanese Pro Wrestling Alliance. Inoki was not landlocked, though, like a lot of other wrestlers in the United States, where he made his way across the pond to the United States for a brief stint in 1964, but would make his way back to Japan shortly after in 1969. And after planning a takeover of the Japanese Wrestling Alliance, he was kind of usurped and told to leave, so he started his own promotion, as I mentioned, New Japan Pro Wrestling in 1973. Inoki's first official match in New Japan was against one of his mentors, one of his idols, one of his good friends, the aforementioned Karl Gotch. He also later took on Lou Thesz in an exhibition match as well. Antonio Inoki is also known for having that amazing match where he went toe-to-toe, or more like toe-to-shin, with Muhammad Ali. His lasting legacy will always be New Japan Pro Wrestling because it is home to some of, and still, the hardest hitting, strongest style, no pun intended, technical wrestling out there today. Speaking of strong style, it's time to take a look at British strong style and the world of sport over in the UK. Coming in at Subject 004, we have Frank Gotch. Frank Gotch is a man that is known throughout the world as God, especially in Japan when it comes to wrestling, and he is also a two-time Real World Heavyweight Champion in New Japan Pro Wrestling. He is a member of the Greatest 18 Hall of Fame class, which for anyone that doesn't know is a Hall of Fame class, the inaugural Hall of Fame class from New Japan Pro Wrestling. And speaking of Hall of Fame, he is a part of the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame and Museum class of 2007. Give it up for Frank Gotch. Subject 005 is, of course, the great Antonio Inoki. Antonio Inoki has an accolade list so long that I probably could have made my own video about it, but instead we're going to hit the major ones. He, of course, is the founder and former president of New Japan Pro Wrestling. He, of course, also is a multiple-time IWGP World Heavyweight Champion. And he is also part of the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame and Museum class of 2009. Everyone, one more round of applause for Antonio Inoki. The United Kingdom is home to some of the nastiest weather, ugliest looking food, and by all accounts, no dental offices. But more importantly, the UK houses some of the best technical wrestlers in wrestling history. No, not you, Zack Sabre Jr., we'll get to you. I am talking about the men of yesteryear, the men that carried the torch for guys like Zack Sabre Jr., the guys that would appear on British World of Sport, which was sort of like a precursor to SportsCenter, but over in the UK. There was that weird World of Sport wrestling revival in 2013, which sort of kind of tried to capitalize on the nostalgia of World of Sport, but the difference is that the World of Sport wrestling back in the 70s and 80s and everything like that was just a 1 hour time block, 4 p.m. local time in the UK. Some of the biggest names to appear on World of Sport were guys like David Fit Finlay, Mark Rollerball Rocco, and of course, GM of NXT UK, former GM of NXT UK, mind you, Johnny Saint. Speaking of Johnny Saint, him along with the Dynamite Kid revolutionized technical wrestling in the UK. Saint with his catch-as-catch-can style, moves that we've seen and sequences that we've seen recreated by people like Tony Storm and Zack Sabre Jr. and Bryan Danielson. His influence is still felt to this day. For the Kid, of course, it was his hard-hitting, fast-paced style of offense mixed with the grounded technical style that really made him enjoyable. He was one of the first guys to take high flying and mesh it with technical wrestling. A lot of this has to do with because in the UK and in the World of Sport, the high spot was the hold. It wasn't the leg drop, it wasn't the back drop, it wasn't anything like that, the body slam. The high spot came when someone put in a headlock, someone put in a leg lock, or anything like that. Subject 006 is, of course, Johnny Saint. Johnny Saint is a 10-time World Lightweight Champion in the UK. He is also former General Manager of NXT UK for WWE, and he is a member of the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame Class of 2024. Give it up for the former GM of NXT UK, Johnny Saint. At number 7, we have David Fit Finlay. David Fit Finlay, of course, is known for being a father to David Finlay in New Japan Pro Wrestling, but more importantly, he is a WCW television champion, a WWE United States champion, and he was in PWI's Top 500 at number 33 in 2007. Give it up one more time for David Fit Finlay. Subject 008 is the Dynamite Kid. The Dynamite Kid has won just about everything imaginable in Stampede Wrestling in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. He is also one of the few men to win 2 awards in 1 year, the Best Technical Wrestler in 1984, as well as the Best Flying Wrestler in 1984. Give it up one more time for the Dynamite Kid. But why should we care about it today, you might be asking yourself? Technical wrestling is a thing of the past. Nobody is a genuine technical wrestler anymore. And to that, I audibly guffaw at you. Technical wrestling is still alive and well in the Big 2-6. We have guys like Zack Sabre Jr., guys like Hechicero, and of course the former AEW World Heavyweight Champion Bryan Danielson. We even have guys that occasionally have matches and are on commentary, adding their insight into new and up-and-coming technical wrestlers like Nigel McGuinness. Speaking of Nigel, Nigel is one of the best to ever do it and one of the biggest what-ifs in professional wrestling history, because his style meshed so well with guys like Danielson that it got him a job in the WWE up until he got fired for failing a wellness policy violation and everything like that, and not being able to pass a physical because of some health complications and everything like that. It sucked. And it was one of the biggest what-ifs in wrestling is, what if Nigel was able to go to the WWE? Would he have accelerated to the same rate that Bryan Danielson did? But before we get to Danielson, we of course have to talk about the best technical wrestler in the world right now, Zack Sabre Jr. One of the biggest things I love about Zack Sabre Jr.'s style of wrestling is the fact that he makes his holds feel like a natural conversation. The way he transitions from move to move to move, the way he gets put in a different hold and then tries to transition out of it and then gets put in another different hold, it just feels like a conversation. It feels like how you go up to someone and you talk to them, and then you're kind of tired of the conversation, so you're trying to figure out a way out of it. And it's sort of like those Telltale games where you gotta find a way to get through the story the fastest, but if you do the wrong things, you kind of end up taking the long route. Back to my earlier statement about how professional wrestling and technical wrestling and professional wrestling doesn't draw money. I would agree with that if there wasn't one glaring giant elephant in the room. Bryan Danielson, Daniel Bryan, whatever you know him as, shows that technical wrestling is a draw. Technical wrestling can be fun as long as you mix it well enough with the cinema aspects of storytelling like in WWE, or the hard-hitting, high-flying offense that we more often than not see in AEW. Bryan has done everything that Nigel did and has done everything that Zack Sabre Jr. has done, but better. His hard-hitting offense and his strikes, combined with his iconic finishers like the cattle mutilation, and of course his signature label lock or yes lock or no lock, whatever you know it as. He was one of the few smaller technical wrestlers to get the rub over in WWE, and also is one of the few guys to wrestle on both WWE's biggest show of the year and win the big one, and AEW's biggest show of the year and win the big one. Subject 009 is, of course, Nigel McGuinness. Nigel is not only a PWI Top 500 member coming in at number 6 in 2009, he is also one of the fondest memories of the Ring of Honor Pure Championship lineage, and he is also a former Ring of Honor World Heavyweight Champion. And his most recent accolade, of course, is winning Best Television Announcer in 2024 from Wrestling Observer Newsletter. Give it up one more time for Nigel McGuinness. The penultimate subject, subject number 010, of course, is Zack Sabre Jr. Zack Sabre Jr. is a former IWGP World Heavyweight Champion, a former IWGP Television Champion, the winner of the G1 Climax in 2024, and he also won Technical Wrestler of the Year award from 2014 to 2020 and once more in 2024. I'm sure there will be more of those in his future. Give it up for Zack Sabre Jr. And last, but certainly not least, we have subject 011 or 011, Bryan Danielson. Bryan Danielson is one of the few men to hold the WWE, AEW, and Ring of Honor World title. He is also a former Technical Wrestler of the Year award recipient, so much so that the award is actually named after him as well. Give it up one more time for Bryan Danielson. Well, now here we are at the crutch of my video. Why does it matter? I've sat here, I've told you about these technical wrestlers, I've showed you them on this chalkboard, and I've asked you to open your mind a little bit, to wonder, is technical wrestling the boring aspect of wrestling? And I hope that you found out that the answer is no. Like I said at the top of the video, I'm not a historian of professional wrestling. I can't give you an extensive beat-by-beat timeline of chronological order of how technical wrestling came to be and has evolved, but I can tell you that technical wrestling has evolved. It clearly has. You take a look at how all wrestling was back in the 1800s and 1900s was technical wrestling. All it was holds and toe locks and leg locks and finger locks, and turned in slowly but gradually into what we know it today as the cinema, as this spectacle, as this sports entertainment. I think the biggest thing that technical wrestling does for professional wrestling is it allows for repeat viewing. I, for one, find myself rewatching technical wrestling matches over and over again, not because I feel like I need to, because I feel like I want to. I feel like I'm rewarded for watching a technical wrestling match over and over and over again, noticing some references, some similar beats, some similar moves, and noticing the nuances of each technical wrestler. At its purest form, wrestling is art, and art is subjective. So you can hate technical wrestling and love the cinema wrestling. You can hate the cinema wrestling and love the technical wrestling. Or you can love all of it, and that's perfectly fine too. And this is not to say that any form of wrestling is inherently bad or inherently garbage. I, for one, am not going to sit here and say that because by no means am I a professional wrestler. But at the end of the day, it's what they do for a living. It's how they make their money. It's how they feed their families. So if someone wants to take a more grounded approach to it so that they can have longevity in their career and feed their families, who are we to tell them no, that we'd rather see you do the high-flying flippy-dippy shit? Speaking of the flippy-dippy shit, technical wrestling is not as flashy as the high-flying stuff we see from guys like Will Ospreay or guys like Commander or Bandito. And it's not the fun that we have when we see big meaty men slapping meat like Powerhouse Hobbs or Miro or anyone like that. It is a form of wrestling that is about total control, total domination over your opponent. I like to think that technical wrestling also not only asks for patience from the wrestlers, but patience from the fans as well, because the payoff from a hold spot can be just as impactful as a payoff from a big body slam or a big high-flying move. No one is going to become a great technical wrestler in one match. It takes time to learn how to do the holds safely and properly and effectively, but more importantly than any of that, it requires the fans to feel the move. Because more often than not, what technical wrestling is trying to do at the end of the day is to get wrestling fans to not just watch the match, to not just enjoy the match, but to pay attention to the match. That is it for today's video. Let me know what you guys thought about it down in the comments below. What do you guys think about technical wrestling? Do you think that it is still just as important as the regular high-flying stuff or the cinema-centric stuff that we see in WWE? Like I said, let me know down in the comments below. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay up to date on all things Nacho Wrestling. And I will see you guys next time.